I'm Cat Oriel, a breaking news reporter with Forbes. Today, I'm here with Councilmember Matt Frumin, who represents Ward 3 in Washington, D.C. Councilmember, thank you so much for joining me today.
Really appreciate being here. Thank you for having me.
Could you explain briefly what is the DC Council, what does it do, and what is your role?
Yeah, we're 13 members. We work diligently to try to represent the interests of the residents of the District of Columbia. It's made up of 8 ward council members, 4 at-large council members, and a chairman. I am the council member for one part of the city, Ward 3, in the upper northwest portion of the city.
And so the council passed the Revised Criminal Code Act of 2022 late last year. What were the revisions and why did the council think it was necessary to change the district's laws around crime?
So the criminal code in the district had not been revised for close on 100 years. Many jurisdictions focused on pulling together and revising their criminal codes over the last decades, actually. The district embarked on this process 16 years ago. It was a massive process to try to modernize the code, harmonize it, and work together with stakeholders with a commission made up of the U.S. Attorney, the police, the legislature, the mayor, advocates on all sides of the issue to come up with a revised criminal code that ended up being a 500-page bill that was an absolutely necessary thing to do in order to make residents of the District of Columbia safe. And that bill, as you said, was passed at the end of last year by the council. I was not on the council at the time, but was supportive of the efforts, certainly, to get our code modernized.
And so what exactly were the revisions that were passed?
Well, it's hard to talk about the provisions. It's a 500-page bill harmonizing many, many different dimensions of public safety. We had offenses that had not been categorized, and we had penalties for some things that were higher than other crimes that you would have thought of were more serious. We didn't have stacking of sentences where a crime might include one crime, but also using a gun in the crime and using stacking as a way to increase penalties in settings where they might not otherwise have been increased. The bill did so many things that it's really not possible to summarize it in however long you wanted to talk about it. And one thing that you could say is that, and I think everybody involved in this has said, that 95+% of the bill was completely uncontroversial, and all of the stakeholders supported it. I think it's significantly over 95%, but the vast majority of the bill was 100% consensus.
Right. And now the House GOP majority is trying to overturn the criminal code. Can you briefly explain why Congress is able to have such a large sway about what happens in DC and how this bill ended up becoming so controversial? Did you ever expect that there would be such a debate around it?
Well, it's always possible that there would be a debate about this. And we are living in an absolutely fact-free zone. The allegation that sentences in the District of Columbia have been significantly lowered as a practical matter is just not true. Every place where sentences on the books have been lowered, they've been lowered to levels that are above sentences that are actually handed down. And moreover, if you compare the sentences in the District of Columbia as reflected in the revised criminal code to the sentences in the jurisdictions where many of the people voting to overrule our criminal code come from, the sentences in the District of Columbia under the revised criminal code would be higher. This is not at all about public safety. This is entirely about politics. That's life. There are politics, and we need to deal with the reality that there are politics. But this is not about public safety. It's entirely about politics. My job is to advance the public safety of the residents of the District of Columbia. The revised criminal code actually would advance public safety for the residents of the District of Columbia. No question about it. We're in this world where it's been turned into a political football, and that is what can happen to the District of Columbia because we don't have statehood. We need to have statehood.
What was your reaction to finding out that President Biden will side with Republicans and not veto their decision to override the criminal code? Do you think that this was purely a 2024 reelection move on Biden's part?
So I am very fond of President Biden and think he has done a great job as president and hope he can go on and continue to do a great job as president. I was deeply, deeply disappointed when the president took the step that he took. And I won't kid you, I do think it was entirely about politics. Again, it's a big bad world, and that's what happens. People play politics. But that is what has happened here. Again, even the critiques that the president has raised of the bill are not grounded in facts. They are grounded in politics. And that's a terrible shame. And we need to, again, address this by getting our full rights as citizens of the United States through having statehood.
And so what do you think will happen next? Where do you hope we go from here?
So one of the things that I said from the very beginning, as I said, I was not present when the bill was drafted and when the mayor vetoed the bill and it came before the council to decide about overriding her veto. My posture then was that I thought that the bill was a good bill and that we should press forward with it, and there was much more to be gained by having the bill come onto the books. But it was going to take a couple of years for the bill to take effect. No provision in this bill takes effect before 2025. And so I and others on the council said, between now and 2025, let's look at things that have been proposed as revisions to the bill to address concerns that have been raised. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's work together to make sure that we're addressing the concerns that have been raised. It had been my intention a week ago to engage in that discussion. It is my intention going forward to engage in that discussion. Our whole goal, and this is true of all of the members of the DC Council, is to preserve and promote the safety of the residents of the District of Columbia. And the idea that we don't know how to do it and that only a Republican Congress knows what's best for the District of Columbia is preposterous. The district has thrived for the last decades. We have done a great job in the District of Columbia and are fully able to do a great job going forward and will. We can and should be an example for all the land. And we should not be a political football. We should be a political example.
Councilmember, thank you so much for joining me today.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to be heard.